Hola, muy buenas tardes nuevamente. Estamos aquí para nuestro segundo webinar del día de hoy. Hoy tenemos con nosotros a Johnny Frank y a Rosalía Valero. Eh, la maestra Rosalía Valero es directora de Desarrollo Estratégico América en Cambridge Assessment English, parte de la Universidad de Cambridge. Rosalía gestiona la actividad de transformación educativa en la región a través de la colaboración con ministerios de educación y diversas entidades y organizaciones educativas de todos niveles. Las áreas de desarrollo y especialidad incluyen los procesos de enseñanza, aprendizaje y evaluación. Johnny Frank lleva más de 10 años trabajando en el aprendizaje del inglés como lengua extranjera. Ha trabajado en la enseñanza, la creación de materiales didácticos, evaluación, marketing y reconocimiento de exámenes. Ahora, como gerente senior de desarrollo de negocios para Michigan, disfruta mucho apoyar a las instituciones y organizaciones educativas con exámenes de inglés americano en México y a nivel regional. Rosalía es parte de la Universidad de Cambridge y Johnny Frank de la Universidad de Michigan. Muchas gracias por estar aquí a ambos.
Hola, hello.
Hi.
Bueno, pues los dejo para que puedan hacer su presentación y nos vemos al ratito. Les voy a hacer unas preguntas cuando terminen.
Claro que sí, Juan Carlos, gracias.
So, Rosalia, it's over to us now, and I'm hoping that you can see the presentation.
It is, yes. Hello, everyone. Lovely to have you here.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for giving us your time today. We hope that we'll be having an interesting next hour or so together. Rosalia, should we kick this off?
Yes, of course. How about we start? So we said that today we're talking about disruption, resilience, and well-being in challenging times. And just before we started with everybody here today, Johnny, we were saying because of technology and we're going to be we were actually going through disruption, resilience, and well-being because it was a challenging time trying to get all the technology we're using today to work. But we're here with a great audience, so let's start.
Yeah, and just to say there's been a variety of materials that we've seen over the last week or so, and this one really has a focus on the teacher, doesn't it, Rosalia, this presentation in particular?
Exactly. I think people, when they hear our names, Johnny, they immediately think about exams and certificates and tests, etc. But just to share with them, Juan Carlos said you work for Michigan University, I work for Cambridge University, but actually it's what we call a one Cambridge team, right? And we're very happy to work together. And we wanted to share this with everybody, where it says what the university's mission is, because it's very important, and that this has to do with our choice for the webinar today, right? It's contributing to society through different things, right? And obviously, very importantly, the pursuit of education and research, right? Those are the two things I would like to point out from all these mission that we have for the University of Cambridge. So what do we mean by this?
Well, we should really have included a grid, but it's quite a complicated diagram. But essentially, Michigan Language Assessment, where I belong, is part of the Cambridge Assessment family, which in turn is part of the university. And there's a whole range of different departments. But today, the real topic is this, isn't it, Rosalia? As a real kind of nice introduction to what we're doing. This is where it comes from, I suppose.
Exactly. And we're talking here, I mentioned research before. Well, we have MRC, which is the Medical Research Council, and this is the team, the unit at the University of Cambridge, where important research on mindfulness, and we're going to start talking about mindfulness very soon. Mindfulness in schools has been looked at very carefully. So we're talking about a 7-year-long research study. We are halfway through this study, but already there have been so many important confirmations of things that were considered before, recommendations of things that we would like to share with our colleagues here today, and so many more interesting things.
Yeah, And as you said, things that we already, confirmations of things we knew. So although this might be a new area for some participants in the webinar, or at least vaguely new, we're not kind of reinventing the wheel. There are going to be classroom practices and implications at the learner and teacher level that will make sense, that you might have even practiced before or that you might have heard of. So we're not going to be introducing anything like too technical. These will be things that you can very much apply in your day-to-day professional and perhaps personal lives.
Exactly.
So here comes one of our tests, doesn't it, to see if we can do this switch.
Well, we said we're not going to be talking about tests or exams today, but we're going to, if you allow us, we're going to ask you to please share your thoughts with us today as we start, because we know we're talking to many, many people today, and we're so excited about that. So we're going to ask you to let us know a little bit about the groups regarding age, right, Johnny?
Absolutely. So you should be able to see Menti now, which I know from your, can you see that, Rosalia? Because I have to go into presentation mode, so I don't know if you can see the question on your screen.
No, I cannot see the screen.
Okay.
Yes, now we can
You
see
can
the
now.
screen.
Oh,
Yes.
there's a delay. Fantastic. So if you go to, we saw you do this with Aurelie and Idolina, two of our colleagues from Cambridge University Press, also part of the family. We want you to go to menti.com, and you should see the top there, a code that you can use. If I just, you go to menti.com on a phone or in a browser, and you should put the code 716981. So we'd like to know a little bit about you and which age group in particular you teach. You might teach various age groups, but we're looking for basically the predominant age group that you would tend to teach. And we know there are lots of people on here, so we're expecting this wheel to get very jazzy as we progress.
It is becoming very jazzy, okay?
And I think there are more than 10, so come on, don't be shy. Menti.com, and then put that code in, and you should have the option to choose, I believe, a maximum of 2 areas that you work in, although we would prefer you to give us the age group that you predominantly work with, just to get an idea of your teaching context and your learner ages. I'm going to take a sip of water while that's populating itself.
Yes, that's a good idea.
And we've got one more, the sort of work, so a bit of resilience we got there with changing the screens that we were sharing, Rosalia. So this one being Menti, which is a nice little tool that we like to use to get large audiences to give us some feedback.
We always mention Menti when you talk about the digital teacher and the digital classroom and how to do things digitally. So yes.
So I think we'll give another 20 seconds or so. So please hurry up. Give us your, it's interesting for us to know, definitely. And of course, Rosalia and I are presenting tomorrow. And if something comes up here that surprises us, we might change the content. But it looks more or less it looks more or less of what we had in mind in terms of the makeup of the group, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's lots of people with young learners and very young learners. And just the last 5 seconds, Johnny, maybe?
Yeah, 5, 4. There might be a delay when I close. 3, 2, 1. So thank you. I'll go back in and now share the presentation, Rosalia. Thank you for those that participated there. That's fantastic. It gives us a bit of reinforcement that we knew something about you. That's what we had in mind. Tell me if you can't see the screen, Rosalia, and I'll do something to change that. But I think now
I'm giving it 2-3 more seconds. Okay.
Seeing a PowerPoint soon.
And this is basically what we will be talking about with this great group of colleagues today. Johnny, this is, first we're going to start talking about why we decided to do this, because this is a webinar for ELT professionals, mainly teachers, educators, right? You know that I usually use the word educators. I have to be very careful when I use it in Mexico because we have the term educadores, right? Okay. And we usually refer to, when we talk about educadores, we're referring to people who teach at pre-primary level. But nowadays, worldwide, when we talk about educators, it's about what we do. teaching English professionally, right? So we talk about not really students, but we talk about learners, and we tend to say educators rather than teachers, right? So we're going to be talking mainly about three things: the disruption, and you let us have a bit of information about some very interesting numbers. We will be talking a little bit about resilience too, but most importantly, I think we will be talking about well-being and things that we can do. Especially what I like about what we will be mentioning is that it will be non-invasive ideas that can be used right away at home for ourselves, but also with our learners. And we will be sharing ideas and resources, and then we'll have some time when Carlos will come back, and there will be some questions.
Lovely. That's a great overall. And as we said right at the beginning, I jumped the gun a little bit, but we're looking predominantly at the teacher, but also some implications for learners, just to reiterate that. And Rosalia, I'm intrigued by these graphics.
Yes,
by
of course,
Kintsugi.
Kintsugi, right?
Okay.
Kintsugi.
So
and if right now you're looking at me and saying, what is she talking about? What is she saying something in Japanese right here? I'm sure we have all heard one way or another or seen something to do with Kintsugi. And it's this lovely Japanese art that basically conveys the message of when something breaks, when something is slightly broken, or even if it's significantly broken, that doesn't mean that that is the end of that. And as you can see, it's mainly to do with pottery and what happens when people make something live again, if I can use that that word to express this idea, this philosophy of Kintsugi. You even use precious things like gold or silver, because something that is important continues to be important, even if there has been some disruption in it, right? And you have a little bit of pottery there, but then look at the other thing, which I really love, because this is about a person who's gone through disruption, a person who's had problems, and now this person, just like the ball there, they have been healed, right? So the piece of pottery has been recovered, the person has healed, so she in this case can go on doing what she had been doing before. So in the case of education, Johnny, what are we going to go back to?
Well, we can't really avoid the context that we're in. It's about change that's been forced upon us with disruption. That picture is particularly interesting because it shows maybe different layers of that particular lady in this case, that is, stays the same at the core, but then is changed and reconstructed to go on, hopefully, in a much more effective and resilient way. Now, if we go to this was something that caught my eye when we were planning this, and Rosalia put this image,
exactly.
and I was like, what do you mean by the oxygen mask principle? And what is that, Rosalia? Just explain it for us.
Well, that was my question to you. Okay, when we fly and they start talking about the oxygen masks, what is the thing that they say about oxygen masks? If you are flying with children or somebody that depends on you for whatever the reason, should there be an emergency situation and you see the oxygen masks in action, Johnny, what should you do? What should we do?
Well, you equip yours first and then the child's, right? Is that the right way around?
Exactly. So what we're saying is, let's talk about these regarding the educational context, right? Where you are the main person who has to make sure you're okay. You get the oxygen mask on first so that you can start helping and supporting the learners, the people you are responsible for when they're in the classroom.
And we've both been teachers, obviously. We've got quite a few years between us of doing it. It seems quite counterintuitive, doesn't it, that? Which is why this is a new concept. Often it's, as a teacher, you want to focus on your students and on their learning and everything that's going on with them. But how often do you take a moment to look after yourself? And that's really one of the key messages of this webinar.
Exactly. And we're getting lovely messages of people saying, yes, I can see the connection. I have to look after myself first so that then I can look after others, right?
If you're not like, yeah, totally. I remember I used to teach a lot of young learners. So if you went into a primary classroom and you weren't very well, like if you just had a stressful situation or something, 99% sure that that class isn't going to go very well, because they can also sense that you're not well. And so that can really damage the learning. It's a very kind of obvious example. But I can assure you that Rosalia and I are both very good pilots. We hope not to have an emergency situation today, and we will go on. So, looking at the basis to do with research and looking at, this is called social emotional learning. So could you just tell us a little bit about that research, Rosalia?
Exactly. As I said mainly we will be talking about mindfulness and how useful it can be. Now, please remain assured, this is still, we're talking to English teaching professionals. We will be talking about how these relate to the classroom. But one of the things when we talk about crisis, disruption, etc., and what we can do, I remember saying to you, Johnny, I remember my classes with young learners, very young learners, right? 5 to 6 year olds. And I said, the thing that you can expect in those classrooms is that you have to expect the unexpected. Anything can happen. So I had learners sometimes when I was presenting and I was explaining, giving instructions, etc., somebody coming to me, hugging me and saying, my granny passed away last week and I'm very sad, right? Or somebody saying, it's my birthday tomorrow, so I'm very excited, right? So that is with young learners, and they are usually very communicative, so they tell you lots of things. They usually tell you what's on their minds, etc., but they can also be very quiet. And then if you know that people are not usually very quiet at that age, when you see things that you shouldn't be saying, you know that there is something happening there, right? But what the research has found, and this is great, and that's why we wanted to share this with all of you guys, is that there can be positive impact when you start looking at how you can support learners, right? And as I said, this is something that you can start doing right away, you yourselves at home, but something that you can also explore in the classroom. Okay?
Perfect. Yeah.
And as I said before, it's not just some new age thing. This is not like the hippie webinar or the 3-week training course for the public sector education here in Mexico.
Would have been a good idea, wouldn't it?
Maybe next time. Yes, something totally new age. So
I think the takeaway from this slide is, intuitively, we know it's good to engage emotionally and on a personal level with students, not overly personal, but to understand their problems, understand their excitement, and connect with that. But on top of that, research has shown that has a positive impact on their learning outcomes. So it's really a win-win situation. Yeah, it's a win-win situation.
So this is for people who say, I don't have enough time for this, I would be wasting my time, which would be a horrible thing to hear. No, when you do something along the lines of mindfulness, you can even see the positive impact, as you can see how this emotional support helps all the learners, and you can see positive impact even in their academic performance. Isn't that great? So you're not wasting your time. You're actually helping them become better learners.
Absolutely. So we've alluded to it, and now we're going to have the slide saying, it's the white elephant in the room, isn't it? When we say disruption, we know that we mean the pandemic that's going on. And there's been some, major disruption to lots of areas of life, haven't there, Rosalia? Basically, it's made us think again about what we mean by learning, and how we engage with learners as educators, as Rosalia was saying earlier. So essentially, our first point of this webinar is to think about teacher well-being. But then parallels to that almost is look at that social emotional learning aspect we saw on the previous slide, and how that can benefit learning outcomes, learners, and teachers.
Exactly.
And the new normal classroom is a very intriguing one, isn't it, Rosalia?
Yes. what is the new normal? I mean, we have heard that phrase so much lately,
Mhm.
right? That it's becoming to some people say it, I'm fed up with hearing about the new normal, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, we know that it's going to be different. There's going to be differences. Some of us, for example, have seen, well, the fact that you can see the different backgrounds here, normally you would see a sort of a normal background, a normal official looking background, right? And right now we are sharing our homes literally with you, right? When you see where we are and how we are communicating with you. But when it comes to rethinking about the new normal classroom, I know that everybody here at a personal level, we have all been thinking about that, but there's other people, other stakeholders, be it government, ministerial contacts, etc. There has been a lot of consideration of thinking about what we have to do, because things are not going to be the same pre-COVID-19. So that's why we have three very powerful words. If you can see here, all starting with R, we have to reimagine things about, very important things about education. We have to reinvent maybe some approaches, strategies, techniques, etc., because education has to be reformed. We have seen education reform happening when these started to happen, right? And we will continue to see these for some time to come.
Okay. So this gives you a definition taken from the Cambridge Dictionary Online of disruption. So, and this is very accurate in our case, preventing something, but like an example of a system, process, or event from continuing as usual or as expected. The positive thing is that although the jigsaw might have been broken, we can still use some of the pieces to put it back together. So when we think about the new normal and we think of reinvention, reimagining, and all sorts of things, redefining, at least we've got a base that we can tweak and we can improve in order to meet a new reality. We're not going to a different planet and teaching there. We're still teaching here, where we can use the fundamentals that we already know and adapt them to the particular needs that will arise. And some of those needs are needs that we know will come, but we're not exactly sure what they look like yet. So it's good that we're prepared for it.
Exactly. And I know you're going to share some very important and really even shocking information, Johnny, but we're going to go very quickly about this.
We are. You make me sound like a news reporter. Some shocking information from Johnny, live from Mexico City. Well,
exactly.
Yeah, this is this is sobering, I'd say. If you look at back in February, this is the UNESCO graphic of Earth, essentially, showing the disruption that COVID-19 has caused. And so back in mid-February, we had 0.1% of total enrolled learners worldwide being affected by COVID. And as we know, that spread, and it became, end of March, 1.5 billion, which is incredible. So 90% of total enrolled learners were impacted. Affected is there are many kind of different bullet points underneath that to show what it actually means, but essentially normality shifted, hence the new normality that we're in now. And then this is from, when was it, a couple of weeks ago, 60.5%. So we're getting back. You see that some of the map is going blue. Fewer countries have got countrywide closures of their education systems. So it's good to see schools opening up again, even if it's with some level of restriction.
Lovely countries in blue.
Yep, exactly.
So even Greenland. Remember, I've been very curious about Greenland, because we usually think of Greenland and not many people there. But even that one was in a countrywide color, which is this purple. And
so finally, just very recently, I think this is from, what day are we on now? This is from yesterday. And so this shows if you on this map, which we'd encourage you to go and see, it's very interesting. You just put the cursor over the country and it gives you an idea of the localized breakdown there, or the national breakdown, I should say. So we're more or less at the same. So maybe we are, I don't know, seeing some sort of flattening. Who knows? But in Mexico, Mexico's a huge country. You see there 37.5 million affected learners. So again, this is huge when you consider the population of Mexico. That's a massive, significant percentage of it, or a number that has been affected by this. but we'll get through it, right? Despite how some
Yes.
people might be feeling. And these, Rosalia, do you want to just tell us where this comes from, this word cloud?
Yes, of course. And to everybody, thank you all for all the comments and the questions. We will
I
be
can't see the
sharing
comments,
links.
unfortunately, but yeah.
We will be sharing the links so that you can go and see yourself. And this is something that has been happening very frequently. We know, Johnny, our colleagues in other parts of the world, etc., talking to lots of educators, teachers, and asking them, how are you feeling? Right? And these are some of the of the words that have been very common, right? So just like we started with a Menti poll here, this is one of the many polls that we have seen, right? Where the words that are bigger, right? Those are the ones that got the most answers from people, right? Where you have things, and it was very sad at the very beginning because it was lots of sort of very, it made you sad, right? To read that many of those words were not positive words, so things like helpless, lonely. But then you have, you start looking at things like adapting, right? Which is a very good thing, because then that's when you see resilience. And I know for a fact that teachers, and I have to say specifically English language teachers, tend to be really resilient, right? We go into the classroom and sometimes teaching and learning, more importantly, happens even against all odds. And that's what we have been seeing, how teachers everywhere, even teachers who have not found a possible means of continuing education through digital platforms, etc., things like that, are doing things. We've heard, Johnny, you and I, about some of our PRONI colleagues leaving messages, right, outside the school for parents to see what they can continue to do with their learners. I mean, absolutely fantastic things. So this thing, and I'd like to think there's one there when you go and see almost at the bottom that says relax. I can guarantee those are people who have started bringing mindfulness in their everyday life.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting collection there.
Yeah.
And so we move on to resilience before we get on to the well-being, which is, as you see there, the ability to be happy, successful after something difficult or bad has happened. So you see here where you can see there's a roller coaster in the image, and I guess that's what Rosalia and I are articulating to you, that this is a journey and it will have its highs and lows, and it's about being prepared for those lows and enjoying those highs and being able to manage both aspects of this up and down process that we're going through. And that's built in as part of resilience, isn't it?
Yes, and we'll also be sharing with everybody some links to some of the very interesting webinars we've had on resilience, so specifically about how people have been reacting, how ELT professionals in other parts of the world have been reacting, and the things that they have been doing, so that you can see some of those ideas, new strategies, etc., and maybe can adopt and adapt to your context and circumstances.
Well, this is the part where we were kind of going along, and then suddenly we've had a bit of a shock, or I don't know, it's a term we weren't expecting. But we're very much looking at this as a glass half full, aren't we, Rosalia, by the image there?
But in a funny way, in an unusual way, right?
Yeah.
I know some of my married friends have said, I don't remember spending so long with my husband or my wife or even my kids, right? And I said everything. They said that the Chinese ideogram for crisis can also be used to mean opportunity, right? And you know, it's like Eskimos and snow, and how many words in Inuit for snow, and apparently it's a linguistic myth, right? But I would like to believe in the Chinese ones, because, for example, I said, well, the fact that I don't have to spend, I think I told you, about an hour and a half getting to the office, to the Cambridge office in Mexico City every day, and then also about over an hour coming back home, Johnny, means that I can have lunch with, you know, I call them my boys, my husband and my son, right? So that has enriched my life. We've had different challenges, but there's also opportunities for different things. But we know that for everyone, there is your home, there is your family. I know in your case, is your family is not here in this country, right? So
No,
that
they live
brings
far away. Back in England.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? But also about our different personalities that come with our work and what we have to do. And then for the people, our colleagues that started using the virtual classroom, right?
Yeah.
All the things that started happening, and we have some lovely anecdotes of people where we see the parents. Sometimes they don't realize that we can see them if their kids are using the screen, and we see them helping their kids right away, right? So it is not about, sometimes you suspect that parents are helping children do their homework. This, we are seeing them in real time, right? So, and also things we have seen, learners falling asleep in front of the camera because maybe that lesson was not that interesting on that day, etc. Right? So feeling exhausted because you and I have seen it. Whereas before, for example, if we had to go out of the office to a meeting, now we can have meeting after meeting after meeting.
Yeah.
And remember, I said there was a time when I said, okay, come on, 10 meetings a day, this cannot happen. And the same with our colleagues, right? So it's class after class after class. And I said, remember, when you're teaching, don't think that the hour should really be 60 minutes, for example. That's a recommendation. And a practical tip, you really have to have at least 5 minutes for very practical things like getting more water or going to the toilet.
Or just, well, I never took an hour as an hour, and I'd have kids doing exercises in the middle of the class just to get them, get that kind of fidgety nature out of them. But yes, we move on, and we go back to the initial Japanese. I can't remember what the concept was now. I can't remember the word, but this element of change, Rosalia, that
Kintsugi, and this is
Kintsugi,
one of my favorite poets in the whole wide world, right? And Maya saying that yes, things happen, you cannot control everything around you, but what you can do is say, these will not break me, or even if it breaks me slightly, think about that pottery, I can come back, right? These will not
you can be
be the
changed, but
end of
not.
me.
Yeah, you can be changed, but not destroyed or kind of dismantled in any way.
Exactly.
That's really nice. Oh,
so what's going to happen? We know nobody is really sure, Johnny, about what the new normal will be like. We see here in Mexico, we talk about traffic lights, right? The famous semáforos changing, red, orange, yellow. We want to see green a lot because green is always about hope, etc. Things starting going back to normal, etc. But what is this new normal? What is going to happen? When are we going to see people in person again, face to face?
Well, that's what we mean by the unknown that we know is going to happen. But we like to think that some of the areas we're going to explore now in terms of well-being and mindfulness will be applicable regardless of what that context ends up being, right? So a key part is also considering learners. We know that. As Rosalia mentioned earlier, we've all had that with little kids come up with their problems. Some of them really quite sad things have happened to them. There's no doubt that's going to be similar with the eventual return to class. There'll have been, grandparents, close friends, or even parents who knows that might have been impacted in some way by what's gone on, and that's going to be something that we have to be prepared to engage with at classroom level and certainly at student teacher level.
And when it comes to family, for example, Johnny, I've told you, grandparents are crucial here in Mexico. We really depend on grandparents for things to happen in most Mexican families, right? And because they are in a vulnerable group because of their age and maybe because of some health conditions, etc. For many kids, they haven't been able to see their granny, their grandpa, etc. for several months now, right? And that is difficult because there is a special connection between grandparents and grandkids.
Absolutely. So that's a bit of the context, and now we're going to move on in earnest to the well-being part of the presentation. And this is a bit more positive, isn't it, Rosalie? It's a lovely picture as well that you chose, I think, for this particular slide.
Yes. Yes, and I think it really is, because when we talk about well-being, and here Jody and I had a bit of a disagreement about how to spell well-being, because I say, "Come on, Johnny," and he insisted on hyphenating well-being, and I said, "Well, you can find well-being like that, or well-being without the
Without,
hyphen, right?" And it
I
depends
love a
on
hyphen. I love a hyphen. It's one
you
of my guilty pleasures.
you're too British sometimes, I think. Okay. But we're going to be talking about the state of feeling healthy and happy. And as I said to you, I use the term non-invasive. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and sell you drugs. Believe me, I'm not even going to talk about herbs. So nothing about, oh, you have to start having ginkgo biloba, John, because that will change your life. No, we're going to see how this is going to work. And let's start with your country.
Yeah, so
Johnny.
a lot of investment, even public funds have gone into mindfulness over the last year or two. In fact, I think there's around 370 schools in England, because there are part of the UK, obviously England, that are going to be actively teaching as part of the curriculum. They're going to be teaching well-being and mindfulness techniques. That can be things like stretching, like meditation, all kinds of things that are going to be incorporated into the curriculum, which I think is fantastic.
I think it's a great idea, but not only in the United Kingdom. And here, if you see, when you talk about the United Kingdom, we were not talking about fancy, expensive private schools. We said the public sector, which is very important, right? That's
Absolutely.
government funding for this.
Yeah.
But look at New Zealand. These, you see, in last year, 2019, this is how they reported officially that they were going to spend the government money, the government funding, right? And look at those first two things there, taking mental health seriously. And when we talk about mental health, we're not just talking about people with severe problems, so we're talking about well-being, right?
That's
and
right.
particularly important, improving child well-being. And this is going to happen through education, through our network of schools. And again, for everyone, not just private sector, okay? For everyone.
No, I'm looking at Maori and Pacifica populations as well. So that's fantastic. And also the final 3 points are kind of the building blocks, aren't they? So they want to be a productive nation, transform their economy, invest in New Zealand. I mean, those are huge points. And the fact that they've plugged mindfulness and well-being into it is very interesting indeed.
Hugely important. And I told you, smiling mind. What a wonderful concept, right? To think about your mind not being grumpy, not being sad, not being angry, but to be actually smiling. That's a lovely thing. And this is where we start talking about things, not just benefits for us, but we said very important. My father was a doctor, Johnny. I've told you this before. So he always said, it is true that sometimes doctors forget that proverb that says, physician, heal thyself. In order for you to help others, as we've said before, in order for you to support your learners, you have to make sure that you're looking after yourself. So look at those wonderful things, benefits. And we're talking about things that you won't have to pay for this. No. You won't have to do, it won't take you a long time. You don't have to commit yourself to 2 hours every day of doing mindfulness. And I know lots of people are saying, okay, but what is mindfulness? We are getting there. And but not just benefits for educators, for teachers, but also benefits for students. And the wonderful thing is that you can do some of these mindfulness practices in the classroom, right? So win-win. And we are crossing fingers here because we have a very nice brief video. And we're going to bravely go.
Yeah, it's very short. We're going to really push our own resilience here. I'm going to press play, Rosalia, and just wish me well. Let me, if there isn't sound, we'll quickly stop it and we will obviously share the link. But let's see. Can you hear that, Rosalia?
I'm sorry to say no.
Oh, that's a shame. It's a good job I paused to check. That's great. That's years of teaching that lets me do that. Do we understand the first question? But anyway, we'll share that link. It's a lovely introduction. And what the two takeaways for me was it can be a few minutes a day that we start with. We're going to see some of those activities in the coming slides. And what they said is that mindfulness is the opposite of autopilot. And I really like that phrase because sometimes you do feel like life just sweeps you along and you have very little control over it, and then you become stressed. So I quite like that kind of dichotomy between being on autopilot and being mindful, and also the smiling mind, which I think is a wonderful expression.
Lovely. Yes. So mindfulness, it really is about the here and now, being here and now. And you think about things, for example, we tend to spend a lot of time worrying about things we haven't done or mistakes we have made. That's the past. But we also think about things that we need to do because they have to be done. So that's the future. And we sometimes forget to leave the now, right? So mindfulness is about here and now. And this we start with something that that can be very helpful, and you will see how long it will take you, right? So this is something you can do yourselves at home, and I really would like to invite you to try these. But the 3x3 method is something that you can also do in the classroom, and it can be physical or virtual classroom, whatever kind of classroom environment you have, we can do this. So it's 3 objects, and we decided to choose objects that we think will be near you. They're certainly near us, right? So it's 3x3 because first, Johnny, remember, you're always my guinea pig when we do this sort of thing, right? So I hope you did put everything near where you are, right? So we will see. Okay, so the first thing is find an object, and I know that you're looking at your monitor, right?
Absolutely.
So you have already found your object. So think, don't say, think, right? So you're going to think this is a monitor, right? And you're going to take a deep breath. So inhale slowly, and you're going to exhale slowly. Don't use your mouth. This is your nose, right? So inhale slowly and exhale slowly, right? 3 times. This is a monitor. Okay, and then we're going to repeat. And we thought it should be with a pen, right? So again, you have your object, right? So you take a deep breath and you think. You're inhaling slowly and you think this is a pen, and you exhale slowly. And again, we do these 3 times, okay? And then the third object is a window. If there isn't a window where you are, substitute by door, for example, right? So again, you can make it more exciting. And instead of saying this because you're not right next to it, then you say, that's a window, right? So already you're seeing how we are getting to practice a little bit of English. Think about very young learners, right? And this thing, and very important to note, you're not using your mouth when you exhale. You're using you're still using your nose. And the fact that you don't say it, you think it, right? So 3x3, how long did that take us?
60, 90, maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes. It was a couple of minutes, wasn't it? It was. Am I right?
Yeah, because we had all the instructions,
I was very into it.
But when you do these, and as I said, think of these that you can do at home, first yourself, and then try and do it with learners, right? And the wonderful thing is, it helps everyone. It helps you when you're explaining to them, and it helps them everyone. Explain it to your family, explain it to your partner, right? It really, really helps. So that's just one idea
of disconnecting and recalibrating. Right? It's a
exactly. Yeah. It makes you be here and now. That's what it does. And you don't have to pay for breathing, which is great.
No, I think that's still going to be free for a while yet, at least in our lifetime. So that's the first of a few activities we're going to be looking at. As Rosalia has emphasized, this is all kind of free stuff you can do, but also resource light, which I know is music to any teacher's ears. We're not going to ask you to be creating things that will take time or expense. And these are things, some of these tips, like the one we just saw, you could easily apply to a class that had 5 kids in it or 40.
If it's a higher level, make it more challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't choose the words, make them choose the words, put them to practice in pairs and groups, etc. Right? You decide how to do it. It's think about the attention span of very young learners. So this is something that you can do like that. It won't take you long, etc. But let's start looking at those 5 steps to mental well-being.
Okay,
let's become more positive.
Absolutely. Smiley face emoji. So, connecting with other people was the first one there. And this is more than just, like you're saying, more than being present, but being there in the here and now, isn't it, Rosalia? So we're looking at, obviously, time with family, but also, well, thinking beyond the classroom, whether that's virtual or otherwise, what's outside that for you to be able to disconnect and to disconnect from work and connect with people, and not just feel like your whole world is kind of anchored or forced to be teacher Johnny or teacher Rosalia. So
exactly. If you are at home with your family, sometimes it happens everybody is doing something different, right? So this is not just about apparently being with people, but really being with them. So which means, for example, it's tempting, I know, to be watching telly all the time. Thanks to all the SEP PRONI coordinators, I've become addicted to something called dark that I hadn't heard about before. And now this is something I try and watch as often as possible, right? But visiting friends or relatives, we know that there are some lucky places in Mexico where you can still do this. So if you do this, if you know that it's okay, and here we have to be careful. I mean, no visiting grandparents, of course, at this time, etc. But remember that social media isn't the only way. And I told you, Johnny, that usually that the wonderful thing about Mexico is that we believe in saying good morning to people, right? And I open my window at 7 in the morning when I'm going to start working, and usually one of my neighbors is already there. So I usually start my day by saying "Buenos días, Doña Jose," right? So this is, and she turns around and she asks how are things, etc. So and you can do these, or even things like speaking to someone new. So it's not just everybody, the same people you see day after day, right? Connecting with other people.
Even
especially you people like you, Johnny, on your own. You're not on your own. I was going to say on your own. You're not on your own.
I was going to say, in fact, I've been using social media less and just calling people, and that's very different, obviously, and much healthier, I think. But anyway, physically active is also quite important, even from very small beginnings. So obviously, this is about mental well-being and mindfulness, but part of that is physical activity, being in the same seat all day, whether that's in a classroom, in a school, or at home, isn't healthy. So getting up and doing exercise every now and then, even if it's stretching, is really good. I, for example, go for a walk a few times a week with my colleague Hazel or Hazel. We go for a walk around the park, and this is great. Like is there, Rosalia, isn't it? It says actually physical movement has a big mental impact on our bodies, particularly the brain.
Do what you can do at home. For example, my house is 2 stories, so going up and down the stairs, right? I have a stationary bike, so I try to do that. That is a quote from my doctor. Your heart loves walking, Rosalia. Right?
Nice.
I've had a situation with blood pressure, right? You know, I tend to get high blood pressure, right? So walking. That's great. And this is where I start telling you, Johnny, there's so many things we want to share with our lovely colleagues here. So let's go on and say, what other things can we do? This is great.
This is something I'm sure lots of people have been doing. Maybe not. So we'll talk about learning something new, or maybe even re-engaging with something that you used to love or do. And just experimenting and exploring a little bit things outside of what you would normally be doing. As Rosalia said, she has a couple of extra hours a day, and I'm sure she's filling that with lots of other productive and beneficial things for her well-being. On a kind of education perspective, exploring YouTube and MOOCs, which are massive open online communities that have courses there. That's a great way to connect with new communities, with new ways of thinking, with new people, whether there could be professional contacts, for example, or different teaching communities. I'm sure lots of those have cropped up over the last few months, particularly focusing on teaching online, and they'll be very specific, maybe in your state. For PRONI teachers, there'll be Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups and whatnot. But also away from that, looking at new skills and challenging yourself in different ways, even if it's only for a few minutes or half an hour a day.
And again, going to the next one, Johnny, we will see something else that is totally free. Be kind. And as I told you, I love dogs. We have 3 dogs here at home, right? So I always ask them, would you please not bark a lot, because I'm having a webinar with lovely people
They
today,
don't always listen,
right?
do they?
They always listen. It's only when we start getting funny noises from the street that they start barking wildly, right? So connecting with others, and this thing about all our parents, I mean, here in Mexico, they always say please and thank you, right? And this is so important. And this is something that can also happen and should happen in the classroom. But also think about smiling. I have these, I printed out this quote from Charles Chaplin: "A day without laughter is a day lost," right? So think about that. Think about your smiling mind. And as I said, I love that concept, right? So connecting with others, and when you can, always, because why shouldn't you be able to do it? Say please, and especially thank you. Let's be grateful, right? Let's all be kind. And that, Johnny, I'm happy to report, is one of the things that in general, when people talk about the changes that have already been seen around the world because of the quarantine and lockdown in some countries, is this thing about being kinder, which is absolutely great, right? Because we are valuing people's presence now that we cannot have it as much as we used to have it, right?
And just looping back around to well, some underlying ideas beneath the mindfulness concept, and that's paying attention to where you are now and what you're doing now, with like that 3x3 activity that Rosalia shared with us, and also considering some of these things about you, your thoughts, your feelings, how you're feeling, the world around you. And we're going to explore that in a bit more detail now.
Exactly.
So the new classroom, we've got one for teachers and one for learners here, which I think is quite useful. And we're considering both teacher and learner throughout this, but I'm sure there'll be bits that intersect and overlap. So we've already looked at the importance of emotional well-being and how that can actually help academically, and being people on a human level. It's good to engage with this social, societal,
all these different things that we have to do. And as I said, we have so many things that we want to share with you, that we're going to go, as we say in English, like a train, not a Mexican train, but like
not British train, but
very fast trains.
So we've got some very basic mindfulness activities at the end of the slide there. We've looked at almost breathing with the one that Rosalia had. Just movement, whether that's closing eyes and having some silent time, wiggling fingers and toes, or relaxing your face. Translated to students, we saw Idolina's webinar where she was talking about total physical response, or TPR, and that links in with that physical movement during the class, whether that's closing and eyes for 30 seconds, or running on the spot for TPR, running on the spot, or going fishing or dancing or whatever. Routines are clearly important. Asking learners how they are and having some sort of response that doesn't require too much. It could be just taking an emoji diary, for example, where on the day they say if they're really happy, they're okay, they're a little bit sad, or they're very upset. You could have that so that you can ask them to complete that every day, and you walk around and check them, and then you can ask them, why are you feeling sad today? Or why are you happy? That's also good for us to know as teachers. And as we've said there, for reducing anxiety, I've mentioned it previously, silent time is fantastic, and relaxing activity is really good. that can be worked in with TPR if you say, oh, pretend you're watching the TV and it's really late at night, or something like that. And also colouring, which I love doing as well. But kids love that as well. Anything with pencils and crayons.
And coloring is also very important and very useful for adults. But this is where I start giving you the time information, Johnny. So
Absolutely.
let's see how
and we'll
we
keep
can
going.
go.
Well, the train goes on. So another suggestion we've got for teachers is to keep a mindfulness diary. So what would this be like? Mindfulness diary this is an example from calm.com, which I think they've got an app as well. We found this quite a nice resource in terms of reflecting on your day. So how you're feeling, what you appreciated about the day, what you'd like to change, what you would have liked to have changed, or what you're going to change moving forward. This is a nice way of checking in with yourself and seeing if you're okay. Another idea is having something that I quite like, a checklist kind of journal where I have different symbols for different activities, and I see at the end of the day that I've done things and I feel like that's progress, which is important for me.
Very.
At a student level, Rosalia, we had some ideas with beautiful puppets being one of them.
Yeah, let me tell you, for example, remember we have colleagues here who teach learners of all sorts of different ages, right? So sometimes when they're not writing yet, they can do things like drawing, they can be coloring, like what's your color today, Johnny?
Probably a blue today.
Because you're blue?
Well, not because I am blue. I'm feeling, well, not even feeling blue is negative, I guess, but blue is in feeling optimistic, actually. Like a
3 seconds, Johnny.
Crystal blue. Well, I gave you more than 3. I'm
so
being a good
I would
student.
say green, because green reminds me of hope, etc. But even things like food. So I feel like I'm being aligned to you, Johnny, because I'm giving you a little bit of sour to make you to see if we can go a bit faster. But even just one word, right? Happy, sad, concerned, etc., etc. And puppets. Can I just say to everyone here, please, puppets, not just for young learners. This is it's like total physical response as well. It's the sort of thing that you can do with learners of all ages, just like games, right? But let's go on to see what else we can share, because we have lots of different things.
Well, now we're wrapping up now. I mean, just a note about the puppets. That's quite a nice way for students, especially if they made their own paper puppet. You have little puppets that can go on the end of pencils or pens. They can make their own, and through the puppet, they can tell you how they're feeling. So that's where that idea comes from in terms of using puppets for younger learners or learners of lower levels that can't express themselves in as free a way as perhaps ones of. Yeah.
We know that psychologists use them, right? When they want to talk to very young kids about how they're feeling, etc. So do you think we have like a minute for these?
I think we do.
Try? Let's be brave.
Stop sharing and then share again, if technology permits. I'm hoping it will. I think it's going to. It's looking good. Right, so you should be able to see my screen any second now. Rosalia, I'm counting on you here to give me a
This time
yes.
we're giving you choices. We're giving you 6 different choices. So we've talked about different things. What are your takeaways of all the different things? And as I said before, not a new age session, not really a hippie session, but things that you can start using for yourselves or in the classroom. Choose 2. Good.
2 takeaways. We always like to end sessions like this to see what people found useful. Hopefully enough. I like this this bubble kind of dot feedback. It's quite nice. So
yeah, it's a different one.
Continue exploring mindfulness, which is getting some votes. Also planning lessons with mindfulness in mind. I like that. I think that's.
Can I just say something about mindfulness? There's lots of different things that you can find. As I said we will be sharing a list of references. So Juan Carlos, I'm sure we'll make sure that you get all those references. You don't have to pay to get very good ideas, Johnny, about mindfulness, right? So don't go for the first thing that say, no, it's only 100 pesos a month. Even if that doesn't sound like don't pay, just explore first.
Yeah, there's lots,
and you can mine lots of different things. Yes.
So we're getting some winners here. The journal's not getting too many votes, but some. I quite like it. I've done that before with teenage learners, and it can be quite effective in terms of telling you, well, they can have like a one-to-one dialogue with you, but they are a lot of work. I will say that.
Yeah, but
you need to commit to them.
Yeah, don't just let that sort of drown there on its own about, I mean, for our colleagues, I'm saying about a journal, because remember, when it's young learners, it can be just, you can see what the association with color sees, etc. So they can tell you. So that can be they're keeping a journal, right? Just what color are you
Like I
today?
said, so something very basic as well, where they've got smiley faces or stars, how they felt they did. It can be very minimal resource.
Exactly, right?
What
And
I'm
have
very pleased
interesting
about, Rosalia,
conversations. Have interesting
just
conversations like which is the happiest fruit in Mexico, right?
oh, that would be an interesting one. What I quite like
Exactly.
from these two is we've got two planning lessons with mindfulness in mind, and also incorporating techniques like some of the ones we've mentioned seem to be doing quite well, and that's great to see. Those are very practical takeaways, and I'm really delighted to see people have seen some value in them that they can pick up and use, and also explore a bit more. I'm sure there's more. Well, we know, Rosalia, I know there's a lot more related to mindfulness and well-being that you can incorporate for any age and
Lovely.
any level. But this is lovely. I'll give it 10 more seconds and I'm going to close. Thank you to those teachers that have
I'll only give you 3 seconds. I don't
three.
see
I'm
why you're
getting
getting
pushed here,
7.
people.
No.
So 3, 2, 1, and thank you. We'll stop sharing that screen.
Yes.
And we're probably going back. I think now is the question and answer, possibly.
I think before that, I think haven't we got a couple of there I see
There
Juan
we
Carlos.
are.
When we see Juan Carlos is the hello and then the goodbye. But I think okay.
No, what?
Over to you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, no, just if you just let me have one second, if we cannot go back to the PPTs, just to tell you, good teaching and good learning takes place when people feel well, right? So very important. And first, we start with ourselves. So you start with yourself, and then you can help and support your learners. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Rosalia, Johnny, you're really funny together.
Yes, please contact us for birthdays or quinceañeras, things like that. You
We
know,
try
we're
our best.
available.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen.
Funny in a good way, I'm hoping.
I loved your presentation. It was amazing, and our audience enjoyed it a lot.
Oh,
That's
great to
great to
hear.
hear. Thank you. Thank you.
We have a lot of teachers from around the country greeting you and thanking you for this presentation. So let me start with the questions. The first one is from María de Lourdes Cedeño Velázquez. How could you deal with junior high students with very low levels in a group of more than 40 students?
That is a question for Johnny. I can see he's dying to
Yeah.
answer that one.
If we're considering mindfulness, then we were saying at the end that student journals can be quite useful. Not kind of not for them to write anything because they've got a low level, but I would keep it very basic, like in terms of how they're feeling. Depending on the age and the maturity of the group, you might use emojis. You could have them ranking it, like giving it a like or a thumbs down. Or
And be
even
prepared for lots of thumbs down because they're
oh yeah,
teenagers.
but you could feedback as a class for mindfulness. See how are we feeling. I used to do that with quite low level primary students and get them kind of telling me. And primary students and even lower teenagers, they're brutally honest, so they don't really care. They haven't become self conscious like they will when they become a proper teenager. But certainly primary and younger teens, if you ask her how are you feeling out of 5, or once you get to the where we can move around classrooms a bit more, once we get to that stage, maybe that wall is I'm feeling fantastic. That wall, I'm not feeling so great. That wall, I feel sad, maybe, depending on how you want to frame it. Or just sticking the emojis there on the walls and getting them to go where they feel. Or as we're kind of through, we have certain rules now, they could just point to how they're feeling. But I quite like the idea of a journal if you can, where it's just, you could even say to them at the beginning, give them some folded up pieces of paper and have 3 columns, smiley face, okay face, and a sad face, and then write the days out as you go.
That's a great idea, and that is several people have been asking about how to engage parents. That is one way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that they can see what they are writing, and only with the 3 emojis, etc., depending on the age, depending on the level of your learners.
Okay.
Oh, Juan
I
Carlos
think
is
we seem to have lost Juan Carlos.
come back.
Maybe we wowed him. So can we show the meerkat? Oh no, he's back. I was trying to get Jody to show the meerkat because you have no idea how much I had to convince him to use the meerkat
It wasn't.
slide.
No, let's take some questions and we will put it on. I'm very sorry. I realized when you
Okay.
said the quote, but are there any other questions, Juan Carlos, for us?
Oh, okay. Another question. I have another one from Marlene Mejia. How to support teens in their emotional education from English? I think it's English teaching.
Okay. We have to understand that teenagers are usually not just, and this is not something personal just for the teachers. It's not that they hate us. I mean, people who know me, and let me tell you, first of all, I love my son, right? Cricket, we call him, right? And I love him. But I remember when he was a very young child, and I say, oh, he's lovely, etc. I said, but when he became a teenager, I was actually actively looking for somebody to adopt him. And I said, you can have him. He's a great kid, and let me have him back in 7 years or so. Because when we are teenagers, there's so many things. There are so many things that are changing that they themselves, and this is true, sometimes they themselves cannot even stand themselves. Right? They can find themselves very, very challenging, not very nice, etc., etc. Breathe. This is the great thing about mindfulness, and get them to breathe, because that is what will help you. And as I said, don't worry, don't get discouraged the first time they just look at you funny and they even laugh, etc., etc. Just try little by little. You can get them, because they will see the wonderful thing about breathing and mindfulness. Even if you don't believe in it, it can help you, right? So even if you don't want, and people who know me, when we have live events, etc., they see that just before I go on stage, the last 2 minutes or so, what I'm doing is I'm breathing. So and if you're teaching teenagers and they're not being their most lovely on that day during that lesson, breathe and get them to breathe. Mindfulness will eventually get you there.
And also, like we said earlier, 60 minutes, don't feel like you need to be giving them very kind of extreme input for 60 minutes. Teenagers aren't going to concentrate for very long periods. So when you're planning, which we said, that's why we asked in the last one, where we put that as an option to put mindfulness into lesson planning. Have breaks, have mini breaks, not for them to go out or anything, but for them to stretch. And that can again be TPR. So I used to do that with teenagers when I was teaching in public schools, not in Mexico, but somewhere else. And you would say, for example, okay, we're going to have a break. And then you'd be saying, okay, raise your right arm, raise your left arm, stand up, sit down, left arm, right arm, stand up, sit down. And then maybe put your a finger from your right nose, a hand on your nose. Or, for example, doing silly things, but it's just a distraction. It lets them burn a bit of energy up. And okay, it's not 100% kind of a mindfulness activity. That's stuff that teachers have done for decades, but it does help with well-being. It does help with mindfulness, and it gets them just to burn a bit of that energy and for them to calm down a bit and to recalibrate in a different way.
Exactly. And when I say exploit your learners, I mean that in the most positive way, is that don't be the only one who's speaking all the time. Get them to challenge their friends there, the other learners, right? Because they love that. They want to be the champions, etc. So get them to think like with the 3x3 method, get them to develop something that is more challenging, right? Because they will want to see the other half of the classroom not being able to do it the first time, etc. Right? So always think about that option.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. I have another question for you. This one's from Gerard Escorcia. How to work social emotional topics online. Human contact is the cornerstone of these matters.
You can also have mindfulness activities when you are working online. especially if you can see the people, the learners that you are working with at that time. Because if you can see them, then you say, okay, this is when I want you to start breathing. And then, as I said, when you're doing, this is not one of the things that people ask you, what's the main difference between mindfulness and yoga? Here, we're not talking about lots of physical activity, if everybody remembers right, but it's mainly breathing and thinking about things, not even speaking, right? So you can do that. They won't be using, all of them, their microphone, because they won't have to say things, but they will be thinking at the same time that they are inhaling, keeping the air in for a little while and then exhaling, right? So yes, you can do it virtually as well.
And not only the kind of explicit exercises like that are mindfulness, but incorporating maybe some thinking about the topics that you're touching in class with the exercises that you might be sending that might not be digital. It might be leaving something, activities outside of school, do these, and then showing some understanding and incorporating into that, whether it's feedback from the students or whether you're going to ask them to expand on an activity. So it's not just kind of an abstract activity they have to do for school. Okay, they have to do it, you mark it, it's like vocabulary, grammar, or whatever, but build on that so that you're kind of engaging with them on a bit more of a human level. And I don't think you need to be like looking at each other physically to do that even.
Don't give it a try. Give it a try. And as we said, first do it with yourselves, right? And then start doing it with the learners. And I think the great thing about this is that in places, in countries where they have been researching this, back in 2000, for example, there were only like 20 serious papers in serious research journals about mindfulness research, right? And last year it was over 500, because this is happening, and this is happening in a big way. And the great thing about it is that you can see benefits even just after weeks. This won't take years for you to see benefits, okay? You will see it in yourselves and you'll see it in your learners weeks after you start. Even if it's something you do only once during an hour, etc., something for 60 seconds, etc. So don't dismiss it. Do try it.
Okay, I have one last question, and this one is a little bit difficult. It's from Miriam Vasquez Jose. How to heal, motivate, and teach a group with students that went through COVID-19 deaths in their families?
I think this is what we talk about. How are you feeling today? It's important when people are going or have gone through a crisis to be able to express their feelings, not to force them, because that is very important, not to force them. But if you start asking them to share how they're feeling, and if it's very young learners, they start with the emojis, or they have with the colors, like we were saying, blue in English. When you say you're blue, usually you say you're sad, etc. Yellow is for when you're feeling like not very brave, and so you start talking about that, and you give them time so that they can see. The thing about well-being is knowing, as I say, it's the here and now, and that they matter, because they are a person. They're not, the most important thing about our learners is that they are people, right? Human beings. So this is the thing. And trying to get somebody to share how they're feeling right away is probably not possible. But this is why you start doing things for a couple of minutes during a class, etc., right? And little by little, they will feel brave enough to share how they're feeling. Maybe they shared with other classmates, or maybe they shared with you, right? But it should probably happen. Probably not the first times, but if you do it, the breathing, as I said, is so powerful and non-invasive. So whatever you do and how often you do it won't have a negative effect. So you can have that. It will always be a positive impact. So be patient, be brave to start trying it, right? And you'll probably see results and more smiles. Talk to them about the smiling mind, right? Things like that.
Yeah, and I don't think teachers have to do a lot of things, have to be a lot of different people rather than and not just a teacher. I mean, healing is a strong word, so maybe you're not going to be a therapist, like some sort of professional therapist. But I agree with Rosalia that at least getting them to open up to you, and then that might take some time. But even if they open up and say, oh yeah, my grandma died or something like that because of COVID, at least you can then start to engage with them and show understanding. And I think it sounds really small, but it's actually a very big step.
And as I said, one of the great things that research, and you will have the references so that you can say, if somebody says, but why are you doing that? You're just being a hippie in the classroom now. I say, no, these will help them emotionally, but also research has proved that these can also help them academically speaking. So these will help them improve their marks, their grades, etc. So win-win, right?
Okay. Well, we have a lot of questions, but we don't have the time.
Oh, okay. This has been great.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. And well, I have to say that on behalf of the Undersecretary of Basic Education, the Director General of Curricular Development, and the National Coordinator of the National English Program, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar and in this course for teachers.
It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure, absolutely.
Live long and prosper. And if I can just add a quick commercial,
yes.
We hope to see you, all of you wonderful colleagues, tomorrow when we talk about something even more practical, right?
Return to the classroom, yes. That's going to be exciting as well.
Okay. We will see you there.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a todos y gracias por su participación y nos vemos mañana con otra serie de webinars en estas jornadas virtuales. Hasta luego.